Hey, everybody.
Is
Jenny
this
and Carrie, go
is this
ahead.
the on consciousness?
This is the one on consciousness. Yes, welcome, Albert. Jenny and Carrie, good to see you again. If anyone wants to introduce yourself and where you're connecting from, this is our social 15 minutes. Actually, we're a little before time, but hey, we're a small group, so even better to, for the introverts, this is the time to speak up because we'll get at least 20, sometimes over 80 people once we get full on. So for anyone that doesn't like big groups, this is the time to say where you're connecting from and what interests you in tonight's topic.
Yeah, I think your meeting is the most popular meeting I go to.
Thanks, Jenny. That's very kind of you.
I mean, this huge crowd comes in.
It depends on our topic, but free will gets all of the philosophers out. So that's where we had over 80 people. That was our best one yet. But it's been a topic near and dear to me since 2007 when I first wrote the essay. So actually since college, when I proved myself wrong as a determinist, and I came up with a good argument for free will. So
People got pretty riled up over that one.
they do. You know what's fascinating about free will? People are so passionate about it, and yet it's a purely academic thing. And I try to remember to tell everybody that only like less than 15% of people are hard determinists. And so pretty much almost everybody believes that we should act like we have free will. It's more of an academic question of whether or not we actually do or we actually don't. And so, but people are very passionate about the subject. You're right, Carrie, and I find that fascinating. I am too. So, I've gotten more like better at like separating myself from my own ideas, but like because I want to always be open that I might be wrong. And so I've learned that like having a distance from my own beliefs is important, and trying to empathize with other people about where they're coming from is more important than being passionate about what I currently believe, because I like to follow my own advice, and I tell everybody at these events, you learn far more by listening to someone with a different perspective and understanding where they're coming from than you do by telling them they're wrong and you're right.
Yep.
So,
It was still
uh,
shocking to me how there was like such enthusiasm on both positions. I thought it would
yes,
be mostly from one side.
right. No, there's a lot of passion around free will. And half of us think that we choose it, and the other half think that they're forced upon them. So, so it is what it is.
Oh
So
no, not another free will debate.
no, we're gonna refer to my argument on free will because the basis of what I present tonight is based on the free will argument. So
Yeah.
while I will agree that the free will argument is completely academic, the implications of my argument for free will actually have far-ranging effects, which we're going to be talking about over the next month or two. And so I'll talk about that when the presentation starts. But right now we're in the social, so I'd love to hear from other people. If anyone wants to say where you're connecting from, what interests you in the topic, we'd love to hear from you. Yeah, David, go ahead.
Hi, David. I'm sitting in Asbury Park, New Jersey. I've been here a few years. I used to live in North Jersey, so I used to get in to New York quite a bit on, many debates. There was an atheist group, a meetup group, Friday nights with Mike, sort of drinking with atheists, it was called. But I used that channel to actually get to chat with Mr. Chalmers and met many of the people who were atheists were just so anti his thoughts. And and I sort of developed my own ideas. I always think of free will as something that it's possible. It's not well defined because the whole idea of we, you're or a single person dictating what can he or she do something of his or her own accord. That whole question just felt not well defined. Exactly what do you mean by a person? Blah blah blah. That kind of stuff. But it's just very interesting to hear what other people have come up with and are thinking.
Great. Thanks, David. Anyone else want to share? Yeah, go ahead, Albert.
Yeah, my this is my first meetup event, I've been on Zoom meetings before, but this is my first meetup event. And I'm calling in from Berrien Springs in Michigan. And my interest in the topic is that I'm working on a talk titled "What is Consciousness?" And one question that might be taken up is, what does Chalmers exactly say about free will? Because he doesn't seem to address the question of free will directly, at least.
Thanks. I'm not going to cover that, but in the presentation, but I'm going to try to cover it in the conversation if I can. So if I get the chance. So hopefully I'll give you some good nuggets that you can use in your talk. And if not, I tried my best. And I like to say, do your best and accept the rest. It actually, the full saying is, don't stress, just do your best and accept the rest. So again, I try to follow my own advice. So I'll do that tonight. Let me let anyone else go that wants to, and I have to make a couple of people co-hosts. And anyone else want to introduce yourself and where you're connecting from and what interests you in tonight's topic?
Yeah, if I may chip in.
Yes, please.
Right. So first of all, you're wrong. So I'm working on this mega project, as you know. Part 4, which is unwritten, as well, partly written, is on free will, and part 6, which is partly written, is on consciousness. So I've worked out that the hard problem is not necessarily a hard problem of consciousness. It is a hard problem. It's why does it feel like it feels to experience what we experience? And I can explain feeling, and I can explain experience, but like putting the two bits together, I can't. So I'm waiting for you to give me the answer on that one. Thank you. But you're still wrong about free will, and I'm looking forward to discussing it.
Say the problem that you wanted the answer to again. Go ahead.
Okay, so I can explain how feeling works. That's the limbic system, and because I'm doing it all from a system point of view rather than philosophy, right? As you know, and I can explain how experience happens because that's the event management process. But the hard problem is, why does it feel like it feels to experience what we experience? So it's that subjective element to it that is the tricky bit.
You mean why we have a sense of self?
Yeah, so I think I know what the self is from a system point of view, but the putting it all together as a, what we experience as consciousness, why does it feel, why doesn't it feel like something else, right? Why does it feel like what it feels like,
Yeah. And
You know,
you're not going to agree with me on that. I'll answer it, but you're not going to agree with me. I can tell you that up front. But that's okay. I'll still answer it for other people.
particularly if you say that it's instilled by God, then I'm definitely not going to.
That would not be my first response. Now, I could trace the reason back to the origins, but that I know you well enough that I wouldn't use that argument with you unless I had no other, and I do have another. That said, thank you, DLJ. Good to see you, my friend. So, and you're a co-host, by the way. Peter, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Oh, well, nice to see everyone again. Yeah, no, I just particularly like this topic. I think it was David Chalmers, the Australian philosopher, who sort of, if I'm not mistaken, was the one who coined the term. I had a few thoughts, which was, one was, I know there's sometimes when people talk about consciousness, there's this, I think the term is like canalization, or maybe it's channelization of like, so for instance, the way we perceive the world, we see it, we hear it, I guess sometimes we taste it if we're eating, or we're just licking random things. We smell it, but it's everything, for the most part, at least. I'm going to assume that most people, at least on the call right now, the way you're experiencing the world is as a synthesized package of things you see, hear, smell, taste, and proprioception. So you feel yourself in a certain way in space. Is anyone ever had, this is the first question, what the experience is like to only feel it through one channel, to experience it through one channel? So for instance, if let's say you're blind and deaf, like Helen Keller, or maybe you could lack, I don't know what it would be like to lack proprioception. But the other thing that's always struck me about consciousness and the way that it tends to unfold reliably as it does is when we consider the idea of something like pain. I know it's many philosophers and scientists have pointed out that, you know, pain is one of the few things that's existentially and just in every sense of the term reality is something that's undeniable. We can't argue.
Will, wake up.
Sorry. And
Oh, I'm sorry. My mic was on.
Oh, sorry. And so there's this thing I've always wondered about the consciousness of pain, for instance, is that pain will often create a reality that's worse than the reality so we think of why we might be in pain. The pain is trying to warn us about something, but the annoying thing about pain and sort of the annoying reality of it is that oftentimes the pain is worse than the thing that the pain is trying to warn us about. So for instance, I mean, there's a bunch of physical examples of this, but like even if you take, for instance, somebody who's severely depressed or anxious, the anxiety and depression is worse than whatever the anxiety is supposedly alerting the person to, especially if it's nothing. So anyway, that was sort of a long-winded introduction approach. So I don't know what your thoughts are about those two thoughts on consciousness.
So I apologize. I was a little distracted moderating. And so I can't give a good opinion. And I have a feeling we have a Zoom bomber here. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Will. If you're seeing the same person that I am, I think it's about time. And if you need help, Abdul, whatever your name is, feel free to reach out for coaching afterwards. But I wish you all the best. So yeah. Yeah, I know. Surprise, surprise.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Wait, Marcus Longschwanz is playing with.
It's funny. I'm actually going to have another event on why people love to hate, and I think this kind of falls into the, you know, the sort of the causing harm. Why do people love to feel
Why is
this
Jesse Stingard
negativity?
raping?
So Marcus, if you need life coaching, feel free to reach out if you're not happy. We will have another event on why people love to hate, because it's important. Like, we need to understand the psyche of these people. Now, I don't want them to disrupt, because unfortunately I feel a little rude not being able to respond to your comment, but we do need to get rid of the Zoom bombers early. Otherwise they cause more harm. I do want to help them, because anyone who's Zoom bombing to get their fun really doesn't have a good idea of what real fun is like. And so, hopefully they will reach out to me, and I'll give them free coaching and see if we can get them to a better place. But the chances that their ego will allow for that is probably pretty low, but I have to offer, right? So I guess I don't have to, but I feel like I should. So that said,
what is a Zoom bomber?
Zoom bomber are people like those guys right there that were basically like interrupting people. And thanks, Albert, for the question. And by the way, Albert, I'm honored that we're your first Zoom meeting. You're seeing the bad behavior of Zoom sessions. You notice those people were interrupting the person speaking, which could sometimes be an accident, but then they were making visual gestures that made pretty clear that they're not here to actually engage in a discussion around consciousness. They're here to disrupt things. And what they do is they record the sessions, they put them up on YouTube afterwards, because their followers like to watch them disrupt actual, Zoom conversations between serious people that are trying to have a meaningful discussion. And they think that that's what they consider fun, which to me says they haven't had enough fun in their lives, which I do feel bad for, but I also don't want to keep them here, because they will be very disruptive. In the past, they've done worse things. And because of that, I've lock down the session so they can't do worse things. And I always have to remember to do that so that they don't have the permissions to do worse things.
Can I introduce myself?
Please, Michael, how are you?
Well, thanks. How are you?
Doing great.
My name is Michael Strasberg. I live in Mercer County, New Jersey. I've been a member of the FTI very close to since its inception. And it's a great organization. We have great camaraderie. We share a lot with each other. I'd recommend people take a look and see if they're interested in joining. And I come to all these events if I possibly can. It's not necessary that one interests me more than the other, but I find all the topics interesting. I find all the contributors have something to say that stimulates thought, and it gives me something to look forward to. So yeah, this is a it's kind of like a philosophical, intellectual smorgasbord, if you will.
Thank you. That's what we're trying to be. I posted a link about the FTI in the chat for anyone that wants to learn more about us. So feel free to take a look at that. It's got information, a lot of information about us to learn more. Peter, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was wondering if okay if I could run the second question again. I think the first one.
Yeah,
was...
please. Like, I apologize, Peter, for making.
Oh yeah, no
but
worries.
if you'd be kind enough to do it, I actually want to answer you. I know you were saying good stuff. I was just paying more attention to the who do I need to boot and who is it that's interrupting you. So I lost track.
Okay. Yeah, so is the two questions I was wondering about was so you have consciousness that we experience as sort of a synthesized mixed package of seeing and hearing and smelling and tasting and feeling ourselves in space and time. But we know, for instance, that if somebody is blind and deaf, that they're going to experience different channels. And I sometimes wonder what it's like to experience an unsynthesized channel of perception. So if you're only seeing the world or you're only hearing it. And then the other thought I had, I don't know if it's so much a question, but if we think about the consciousness of something like pain, which many philosophers and scientists and thinkers would argue is the one type of consciousness we can't argue away, just because of its nature, that the strange and really somewhat annoying thing about pain, and both emotional and physical, is that a lot of times the pain is worse than the thing that it's, according to why it exists evolutionarily, is worse than the thing that it's trying to alert us to. So for instance, I was using the example of, so there's a physical example, but let's say somebody is severely depressed or anxiety ridden. They might argue that the anxiety that they have or the depression that they have is worse than whatever their depression or anxiety is supposedly alerting them to. Because you hear a lot of people will say anxiety is your best friend. It's like someone alerting you that there's a car coming up on your rear or there's a smoke alarm in your house. But it's like, imagine if the smoke alarm was worse than the fire. And so those are my two thoughts on the sort of the way in which pain is ironically worse than the thing it's supposed to shield you from, and what a single channel of perception is like when, you know, what consciousness is like when we only experience it through one or a few channels instead of as the sort of combined packages that it is.
For the experiencing less types of sensory perception, you know, you can go through like a sensory deprivation chamber, I think it's called, and like,
oh yeah,
you know,
pretty cool.
That would be a way of sort of experiencing what you're talking about. You know, it's temporary, of course, but I don't think any of us would want to do it permanently. So better to have it be temporary. But you know, even if you you blindfold yourself and you put your something over your like noise canceling earphones on, you know, you can reduce it. And the longer you do that, the the one thing I can say is that for people like Helen Keller and people who have sensory inputs that don't function effectively, they have stronger senses, and there are other senses that make up for the ones that don't function correctly. And so that's probably common knowledge, but I figured I'd share it in that the human brain is very good at sort of compensating for it. And I forget, there was like, I think there was an example of like someone who was blind, but they could actually basically use their voice as like sonar essentially, where they could hear their voice reflect off of other things and see whether or not there were objects that were obstructions that were close to them. And like, wow, that blew my mind that a human being could do that.
Yeah.
But it didn't seem like fake news. This was when I read that, it was before the days of fake news, so I don't think it was. I think it was a real thing. So yeah, that said, I want to let Marcus go, and then we'll get started with the presentation.
Garrett, I could just add to your story.
Yeah, please
Garrett.
go ahead, Carl.
It's called the echolocation.
Thank you.
This describe, and I heard an in-depth story about it. The guy that actually practices, he can actually ride a bike in a city, and he's blind through that, and he's actually teaching others to do it as well.
Cool.
He's been run over 46 times, but that's besides the point. Who said that?
What?
No, joking, just a joke. I'm not a Zoom bomber.
Oh, okay.
It's Will. As a silly joke, I said he's been run over 46 times.
Yeah, Will is an Aussie.
That was a silly joke. I'm sorry. Please, nobody.
Well, don't joke when we have Zoom bombers. So.
See, the Zoom bombers aren't as good as me. I'd be an excellent Zoom bomber if I chose to pursue.
You would be funnier than them, I admit that. So
I know.
But you're a happy enough person that you don't have to Zoom bomb. So
that's right.
We know you're playing around. So
I'm a nice Zoom bomber.
Marcus, we would love to hear from where you're located and what interests you in tonight's topic.
Yeah, I'm from Germany, and I just wanted to say, River, you are so beautiful, really.
So thank you.
yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So everyone across SDP needs to use it.
So David, you want to go quickly?
Yeah, sure. I'm interested in consciousness. Being a materialist, I wonder how it works. How does a material brain produce what we call subjective consciousness? It's amazing. It's amazing.
How does what? I'm sorry, say that again.
How does a purely material brain, our neurons, sparking away, produce a subjective experience? It's it's astounding to me, and yet I maintain there's nothing beyond the physical brain doing it. That's my position. Thanks.
I have a technical question.
Yeah.
I guess that the palm that I'm seeing at the corner of some people's screens means that they want to participate.
Yes. So
how do you
if you see at the bottom of your screen where it says reactions and you click that, there will be a raise hand option. And when you click that, your hand will come up like this. And then you also have the option to lower your hand. And then you can raise and lower it when your hand is up. We'll call on you. Although during the presentation is short. Most of tonight is going to be focused on conversation. But the presentation is short. So, but we don't take questions during the presentation. But after that, you'll be able to. You can raise your hand during as well. But I'll call on you after the presentation. Does that make sense, Albert? Do you see it?
Yes, absolutely.
Cool.
I don't see the button though.
When you click on reactions, then you would click on raise hand after that.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the reaction.
At the bottom of the screen, like you may have to scroll to the right.
Albert, you see more? Dot.
Yes.
Yeah.
I found it on the more category. Yeah. On the more, it's one of the last options.
Well, it says pin and add profile picture.
You're under participants there.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Yeah. Go for. Can you see a dot more button?
At the extreme right.
The very bottom right hand corner of the black part of the screen.
More. 3 dots.
Yeah, I don't see it. Maybe there's something.
Or Albert, are you using a desktop app on the Zoom or a phone or an iPad?
No, and before I was seeing a whole set of icons at the bottom of the screen. For some reason, I don't see them. I don't want to take up people's time too much, but for some reason, I'm not seeing that set of icons that I was seeing before at the bottom of the screen. I don't know why.
Oh, are you on gallery or speaker window? Do you see a lot of us, or you just see one speaker?
I see gallery. I'm on gallery.
It doesn't
Sometimes
make
it
any
disappears.
difference.
And then, but sometimes it disappears on the speaker, but if you move your mouse, then the buttons show up at the bottom.
Yeah, you want to move your mouse over the black part of the screen where all the faces are.
Yeah, oh, I see. Now they just come up.
There you go.
Just
Okay,
came up.
just
And
a
we could be under
caution.
more. Okay.
So
Um,
it's right next to, you say chat, share screen, and then show option captions, polls, and then there's reactions.
Yeah,
And-
well, that isn't there either. I'm sorry to disappoint.
Then look
Yeah.
at the door.
Guys, I have reactions,
Hello?
and it's been staying. And I only have two options under reactions. One is play chime for raised hands, and the other, which is checked, is recognize hand gestures. But that's it. On a surface.
Just to get us over this, Albert, if you want to say something, instead of raising your hand, just put it in the chat and I'll keep an eye out for you and I'll raise it. And I'll
Or
raise
you
my
you can also just physically raise your
Yeah,
hand.
I just
we'll see you.
found it. I just found it.
Yay.
Yeah, it
And
appears that
David,
we're
same for you. If you want to just physically raise your hand,
like
and then
our-
I'll ask one of our co-hosts to point out
yeah, can do.
yeah.
Thank you.
just recognize. Play
Oh
chime.
shoot. Now I know why that's happening. All right. I made a little mistake. Will, can you take care of
Hello?
let me just ping Will.
Hello?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Alonso.
Gotta say, I love the teamwork,
Hello?
guys.
Guys?
Thank you.
Irgendwie kann ich gar nicht
Alonso,
reden.
did you have something you wanted to say?
My mic doesn't work. I can't mute myself. Maybe I try
We
again.
can hear you, Alonso. We can't hear you, so your mic works.
I think he was saying he can't mute himself.
Mm.
I
think he logged off.
Okay, so why don't we get started? Again, it's a short presentation today, mostly because I think most of the logical argument that I gave came in the presentation that I did on free will. And so, I'm going to rely on that. And I'll sort of reiterate the argument from I think I have a slide on that. Yeah, I have a slide to reiterate the argument defending free will. I'm guessing we will talk
Alonso,
about that.
Spain.
So I'm guessing we will talk a lot about, I figured he was a troll, but, just, I like to be 100% sure before we boot them. I have had people reach out to me afterwards saying that they weren't a troll and that they shouldn't, felt bad that they were booted, but so I try to be 100% sure. So
ask for show their face first. People don't show their face normally.
at the point that he does that, I'm not going to bother asking for his face. And, yeah, I don't want to force everybody to put their face on YouTube.
No, first timer. If they came here before,
Sean, we can talk about it offline, but
Okay.
I don't think that's practical. So that said, the only reason people were coming back, Nick, is that I was not reporting them. But now I'm reporting them to Zoom, and so they won't be able to come back. I'm just used to booting bots that I don't want to be in the meeting. So I have this trigger to not report. And so now I'm reporting them. And Will, if you can keep an eye on the trolls and boot them, you know who are watching. And so if they act up, you know, so that said, I'm gonna give a quick intro. So you guys introduced yourselves.
Hi. Hi.
Victoria, did you mean to be off mute?
Oh yeah, I did. I was talking to my cat.
Okay. So you guys all introduced yourselves, or a bunch of you did. So I'm going to introduce myself. My name's Garrett Lang. I'm a software developer turned software inventor. Most of my career I was doing that. And now I'm an entrepreneur. My hobby is writing and discussing practical philosophy, and I'm also the executive director of the Freethinker Institute. Tonight's event is brought to you by the FTI, which is what we're called for short. We're a not-for-profit looking to support and empower members. And I have 3 screens, so I'm going to be looking back and forth throughout the evening. And we focus on trying to help members be the best version of ourselves, to seek truth and to be fair through transformational personal and professional development. We have free events like this one every Tuesday evening, covering a wide range of topics not typically covered in academia or industry. Consciousness wasn't part of the college curriculum, at least not when I was there, although my 400 level computer science course is what led me to write my essay on free will. So there's that, but it wasn't intentionally written, created that way. Next, we also have weekly members only events that Michael alluded to earlier, where we get to know each other at a really deep level and help each other apply practical wisdom into our daily lives. We have only one rule in the FTI, and we do take it very seriously, and that is to remain polite. Zoom bombing is not polite, which is why those guys were booted. And if the remaining folks ever step out of line, they will be booted too. But we like to give everybody a chance and to give people the benefit of the doubt until it becomes brutally obvious that they're not going to be polite. And we give people warnings generally, unless they're a Zoom bomber. And then once it's clear they're a Zoom bomber, warnings generally don't help with Zoom bombers. I tried that early on. So that said, I like to encourage people to do what we call listening to understand, which is when you disagree with someone, try to listen with empathy to where they're coming from and understand where they're coming from. We learn a lot more by listening to someone we disagree with than we do by telling them they're wrong and we're right. And so I'll encourage everybody to try to do that tonight. First, I'm going to do a believe it or not. This is how not hard I think this problem is. A 6 slide after the intro slide, a 6-slide presentation on why I think the hard problem of consciousness is not so hard after all. It does rely on my argument defending free will, which we did another night. Because the presentation is very short, I'm fine rehashing parts of that argument. I'm going to summarize it to explain why I think that the hard problem of consciousness isn't too hard if you understand that we have free will, if you believe that we have free will, and if my particular argument is convincing, then the hard problem of consciousness isn't hard at all. It's actually been all but solved, and my argument defending free will is the last piece of the puzzle, and I'll show that puzzle in the last slide. So that said, I will go ahead and share my screen, and let me get into presentation mode before I do that. All right, so you should be able to see my screen now, and I'm gonna be able to see people. So now I can see all your friendly faces. And so tonight we're here to talk about the hard problem of consciousness. I'm going to talk about what is the hard problem of consciousness, because it's always good to use definitions to start off. And then I'm going to talk about why it's hard, why it's considered hard. And then I'm going to talk about a summary of my argument on free will. And then I'm going to talk about why it's not so hard after all. And then I'll talk about the actual mechanics of how I think consciousness works. And that said, we'll go ahead and get started. So basically, Chalmers is the guy that came up with the hard problem of consciousness, the phrase. And he basically more or less said, that giving an intelligible account of what we, basically, the sense of self that we experience, like how did it come about from physical processes, which David mentioned as well. Sort of like hard to fathom how the sense of self would come about from physical processes. And it baffles scientists because most scientists are determinists and think that it did come about from physical processes. And I'm going to try to make a good argument that it didn't. And it does rely on my argument defending free will. But I'd argue that it actually not only didn't, but that it could not have, like it definitively could not have, if my argument defending free will is right, which I'm always open to being wrong. I like to say when you admit you're wrong with good judgment, you're immediately right again. You're just more right than you were before. So I have no problem if someone proves me wrong. And so all of this is open for debate for the discussion portion of the evening. And we'll have a polite, healthy debate about it, as we always do in these events, and get a diverse set of opinions, and we'll all make up our own minds what we want to believe at the end of the night. That's what free thinking is all about, is listening with an open mind to other people, which we have in the Free Thinker Institute, what we call the 5 intentions. The first of which is to be the best version of ourselves, to seek truth and to be fair. The second of which is to transparently share our beliefs, which I'll be doing with you guys tonight on the topic of consciousness, and then also to listen to other people with an open mind, because only when we do that can we learn, grow, and develop and learn new things. So I'll suggest that you all do that this evening. So that said, I'm going to go ahead and explain why it's hard. So, and I kind of already alluded to this, is that because people, in the scientific realm, think that consciousness arises from physical processes, and that all that exists are physical processes and that they're deterministic, it's actually impossible to show that because, well, consciousness didn't arise from physical processes, if I'm right. And so that's like saying, why is the square round? Like you can't answer that question, right? Like, why is the square round? Like squares aren't round. And so it's actually a nonsensical question to say, how did consciousness arise from physical processes? Again, assuming that my argument defending free will is right. So let me get to that. I'm going to summarize the argument on free will. And I also don't expect this one-page summary to convince you all. I also don't want to go through the entire argument beginning to end, because that would take an hour. Although if we have enough new people that weren't at the presentation on free will and people want to go down that path, I just like having an intelligent conversation with people. And so I'm happy to answer whatever questions people have, but let me try to summarize it. It took about an hour for me to present it in detail the other night when we covered free will. But for tonight's session, let's just assume that this is right, to understand where I'm coming from, do what I called, listening to understand and try to understand where I'm coming from rather than just immediately try to prove me wrong. Basically, there's this 400 level computer science classes where I learned about a theorem called Gödel's incompleteness theorem. It basically tells us that logical systems are either inconsistent or incomplete, which means that a logically consistent system cannot prove true all truths in that system. And an incomplete system means, that's an incomplete system. The other possibility is that it can prove true all things that are true, but it's inconsistent, meaning some of the things it proves true are actually false. And what that means is that there's no perfect, what's called black box, that can answer all questions with absolute precision. And this is a theoretical construct. The only, and let's just say the theoretical, I showed in the argument on defending free will why that construct applies to the universe itself. And so what I did in the argument is I showed why the entire physical universe looked at one moment in time, and then you pretend that the entire physical universe is has a mass energy configuration at a moment in time, and then the laws of physics are a black box which are operating on that physical universe of mass energy at a moment in time, and it's bringing about the next moment in time. We're assuming determinism is right here. It's an assumption. It's called a proof by contradiction. And basically, if the laws of physics are a perfect black box,